This is Jeff Chrisman, and I'm here today at the Art Hall on 23rd Street in Uptown Oklahoma City, and I'm visiting with Tripsitters. We've got Jeremiah Rankin, Michael Moffett, and Logan Morris. Guys, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I thought what we might do is kind of dive in, and first, for listeners who may not be familiar with you guys, it would be really cool if you could maybe talk just a little bit about your sound and about the music, and then we'll kind of go back a little bit into your history and kind of go from there.
Sure, yeah. So if we had to describe our sound, I guess we would say it's indie dream rock style. We draw from a lot of different influences, anywhere from the hip hop scene, rap scene, like Tyler the Creator, to indie alternative scene like Vampire Weekend and Hippocampus, Boy Pablo, things of that nature.
Definitely people who are kind of breaking conventional pop structure, doing something a little bit more artistic, really tend to inspire us quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah, I didn't know if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about some of your inspirations, or just some of the bands that have been formative for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, growing up as a kid, OK Go, the Beatles, and Weezer were some of my biggest influences that made me want to get into songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
What about you guys?
Well, I think it's kind of crazy because we all grew up with different influences, obviously. I was into hard rock, classic rock, and metal, which is something that I don't do as often now, obviously. And Logan, grew up with Blink-182.
Church stuff. So
church stuff.
a lot of ethereal, nice, good
reverb,
long chords.
Which is crazy because we all come from those different genres. But now, coming together, making this indie dream sound, and we all listen to a lot of the same music now.
Well, and especially the longer we've known each other, I would say that we've influenced each other's taste as well, and kind of the longer we know each other, we've just become a conglomerate taste. And we've all kind of just honed in kind of a vision of one, what we want to be making, and two, just what inspires us, kind of what's catching our attention at the moment.
Yeah, and it was interesting. In fact, that was the word that I was actually, when I first heard you guys, that's actually what came to mind. And of course, and being someone who's a little bit older, it also kind of called to mind, I don't know if this is inaccurate, it's almost like it called to mind some like the 60s kind of California rock, some of the surf rock and things like that. Definitely. Not saying necessarily in a pure, 100% pure sense, right. But you got, it's almost like in a way when I listen to your guys' music, I'm feeling like strands running through. There's just kind of different influences, and then there's a lot of different things going on. Kind of, I don't know if I'm off base on that.
No, for sure. Because me and Michael are our parents showed us basically just a lot of Beatles when we were younger. So that's a bunch of 60s vibes, 70s from us from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, artists like the Beatles are just completely timeless because it's. When it comes down to it, it's just guitar, bass, and drums just doing some chords that are just artistically cool. It's really versatile. You can do so much with it, and I just really appreciate the way that some people at that time were kind of pushing the boundary, just kind of thinking of music as a thing that's digestible in a different way, something a little bit more to be analyzed. I really appreciated that about kind of that era of music, for sure.
Yeah, and of course the thing with the Beatles too, that they seem to spend a lot of effort, their energy and effort in the studio. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of coming to mind, kind of in the moment. It'd be really interesting to hear from you guys. How much of this, what's the difference between what happens when you guys record in the studio, versus the live experience of Tripsitters?
Yeah, well, definitely. Studio is a great time to be experimental and just see what works. We definitely don't ever want to rush anything in the studio. We want to see, make sure everything is there for a reason, make sure everything is intentional, and everything is kind of, especially in the new demos we're writing, kind of serving whatever this vision that we kind of are seeing for it. We're just getting so much better at articulating,
and
all of that.
It's cool because all of that does translate really well live.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like our shows are very energetic, something that people can get into and be a part of and become a part of. And I feel like even though, it's polished, obviously that sounds really nice, it's something that we've constructed, it can translate really well live into something that people can connect with and still have this authenticity to it.
Oh yeah,
because it's different. It's always kind of disappointing going to see a live band and you're like, oh, it's just not quite what I expected. So that's what we try to get across is this authenticity, this genuine spirit between all of us.
Yeah, and then as far as your all's process, it would be really interesting to hear. And there again, I want to use that term loosely. I don't want to infer that you guys have this all down in a real rigid, sort of mechanical way. But maybe it might be interesting to hear a little bit about just how you guys write the music that you do, or maybe if there's any to kind of give everybody a glimpse into, so to speak, how things come together, or where you guys get ideas.
Right. So interesting. Logan not used to live in Norman with us. He used to live in Tulsa and used to commit. He used to, take a drive down every couple of weeks until he moved. And so, when we were writing at that time, it was a lot of Michael and I, and, Logan could come in a couple of weeks later and lay something down, but it has kind of morphed into being able to be together. Michael will have this seedling of an idea, or I'll have this seedling of an idea, and we'll just all get together and be like, hey, let's just work something out, whether it's shitty or not, just whatever we're creating, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
And so usually that'll happen. There'll be an inkling of an idea, and we kind of develop it over a couple days and jam it, and then it kind of turns into what it is. We also have a studio at our house, and that's how we make our demos and first drafts and things. And so usually we'll put those ideas down as we write them, and kind of develop it authentically with instruments and with us, and then use the cool layers, synth layers, and all this cool
we don't want
electronic
to.
stuff.
It's tempting to rush into recording, but it's like really important to even though if we might be messing around with kind of a demo in its first stages, to really take the time to, without having anything solidified, just work on it together and just play through it as many times as you can and kind of just see where it ends up taking you. Just trying to set up an environment that's totally. You're free to take risks. You're free to do anything, really, just because that's what we're trying to do, just express ourselves in a creative way.
Yeah, and I always wonder, too, kind of because, essentially music is a form of art, and I've talked to visual artists before, different types of our performance artists, different genres, and what I'm wondering is there kind of a tendency to want to have that have that finished product as soon as possible?
It's awful because we have 4 songs out right now, which is great. That's something to have out, but we're all itching. We're that was released in October. I want more stuff. I want because that's where I was at emotionally at that point. Now I'm in this different place, making this different art, and I want people to hear it and relate to it or express it. And so it's very frustrating wanting to put something out so quick, but we're kind of perfectionists.
And especially feeling like you've grown already so much. If we were to redo that album, or that EP, there's so many things that we would have changed with production or with writing. And the way that we recorded it then isn't even the way we play it live now. Keep it at the studio is not where the song stops. So we keep it going. We keep developing it, and as we develop our own kind of vibe that we're bringing to our shows and stuff. All of our songs have completely morphed from the EP version to the way we play it live. They definitely, I'd say, we've brought in that dreamy feel, that kind of surfy feel you were mentioning.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I literally have not heard that from a live, from a local band that got people I can sit here and talk to in a long time. Unless I'm missing something. This really does feel like this is something that you have a lot of music, and I don't want to say that nothing all sounds the same. But this is something that really for me was a huge reach back in time. It really was.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about that, that people can find something to relate to. Whether you're 10 years old, whether you're 40 or 50 years old, you hear something and it reminds you, and you just get taken back to that place. And that's really cool that music can do that.
Yeah.
Well, for me, music is all about, lyrically, musically, whatever it might be, it's all about just, kind of expressing, our worldview. We're all, I don't know, just kind of communicating the way we think about the world, the way that we think about existence, really. And so we find that people that gel with our music feel the same way. They have those same opinions or thoughts on life and stuff. So when they hear our music, we're able to connect with them over that, and that's just a really crazy thing to find like-minded people over music.
Yeah, because I almost gather that it has kind of a contemplative. I don't know if that's the right word, kind of a contemplative feel to it, in terms of the lyrics.
Right.
Really listening to what you guys are really trying to get across.
Well, yeah, because the whole point in writing these lyrics is just, it's how I experience life, it's what's happened to me, and hopefully in some form of this human experience that we have, someone can relate, even if the song might not be, I might have written it for a completely different reason, but if someone, this one lyric just sticks out, and just affects them, and that's the whole point. That's
Yeah.
that's so cool.
And then as far as your live shows, is there, if I could ask you kind of get some idea of maybe what the vibe is,
Yeah.
or kind of how, what does it kind of feel like to, to be at one of your live performances?
Lots of high energy. Lots of it. 'Cause I'm not trying to be boring, You're not trying to get up on stage and just stand there and let people go, yeah, it's good music, I guess. But I like to play good music and get people to move.
Yeah.
That's one. Yeah, one.
Well, I think people can really tell when we're playing together that it's really just us being ourselves up there. We're really just hanging out and being goofs, We're having a great time, and the response is so great. I mean, they can just tell. I guess I don't know, the authenticity. I guess we're just here. We're friends. We're making music. We're expressing our worldview. And that's just really great. And the response has been unimaginable. People have been singing along to our songs at our recent shows. Wow. That was a new thing for us.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, as far as has there been any interesting comments or things that people have shared with you guys after a show, or maybe communicated with you in some other way?
The biggest thing for me is wow, you guys are from here. You guys are like a local band.
That was a huge compliment.
That's the biggest compliment to me personally.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're aspiring to do, is to play other places and reach out and get more people on board. And so it's really humbling to hear someone be like, "You're from Norman?"
Yeah, and then I was going to ask too, as far as the name, and I have to admit here, I'm kind of dating myself. But we were talking a little bit before the show about the whole Tulsa Broken Arrow thing. But being someone who was a hippie during the 70s, the name Tripsitters definitely has it definitely has a connection there. So that's why I was just in as much as you guys would want to talk about it, just as far as maybe what it means to you guys.
Sure, of course. Well, for those that don't know, a tripsitter is someone who's sober in the moment with someone who's tripping on psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
Which is great because there's that solid person there to make sure don't go a little too crazy. keeps you down to earth. And that's a kind of a cool relation. The story of how that happened is he and I, when we were in early college, were jamming with this guy, and they had been jamming one night, and one of their friends had come over and decided to trip, and so they were just hanging out, and they're like, "Hey, we're the Tripsitters," and so it kind of just took that form because being in college, there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and it kind of just embodies the experience of what it feels like you're just this person who's taking in all these different things. People are totally on a different wavelength than you, and you're sitting here and taking that in and learning things from them, learning things from other people. So I think it's a really cool inclusive term that works really well for a band name.
Yeah. It really caught my attention, and what I tried not to do was I tried not to decide based on the name what I thought you guys were about. Even though there was a tendency to want to kind of jump to those.
To assume,
yeah. But then it also gets me thinking. You could even take this beyond hallucinogens and things like that, as far as the actual being that sober person. In that, in some ways, is it possible that all the stuff that we get caught up in our mind as human beings, those are kind of like trips in a way.
Exactly.
So I almost wonder if this is kind of an aspect of this. That you guys, that your music can even really kind of be that sober influence as someone is kind of going through what they're going through.
Exactly, yeah, because things can send you on a trip. Things like I said,
and that's the crazy thing. So much of our world is pretty much so much of our perception of reality, you could say, is determined by these inner factors that aren't even necessarily real. That's crazy. All this anxiety about anything in your mind.
Oh, yeah.
That's not even technically a physical manifestation in the material world, you could say.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like a head trip. You'd almost call that, or you just even if you're just having a bad day or you're kind of down on yourself for whatever reason. Yeah. I heard someone say once that it's kind of like when you talk about reality. What are we really talking about here? At the end of the day, this is really relative reality. All of the things that we see and think, but there again, it's all relative.
My reality is completely different from his.
And you can never understand someone else's reality. You can only understand your own perception of your own reality. And that's really mind-boggling. That the fact that everyone is kind of going through their own never-ending train of thoughts that they don't even necessarily have control over. That's just really crazy. And so I don't know. It's crazy that people can relate to things over things like that. Totally separate experiences, but there are these things in life that connect. You know, you connect us together over things like that. Yeah.
And I'd have to wonder too, maybe with the audience, not necessarily being able to talk to all these people, but kind of wondering maybe, is this somehow this, people are on different frequencies, they're
Right.
on different head trips, but yet when they're, with you guys for a period of time, that, maybe this is it's a soundtrack almost to that, isn't it?
Yeah.
People can be coming to this from different angles.
Entirely different perspectives. We've actually had we played a show one time, and there was actually a guy, I had no clue if he was tripping or not, but he was sure acting like it, which was so crazy because, we had our friends there, we had people who had never heard of us there, and then this guy just like walks up on stage and is like totally going crazy. He's like, you gotta let me play with you. You're like, I want to do all these things, like, let me be your DJ, and we're like, whoa. We're all here to just enjoy the show.
Let me introduce you guys. Let me do something. Let me do something.
Hey, it's okay if I get on stage, right, guys?
All right, man.
I was going to say, as someone who's not a musician, but as I've been in situations, and it hasn't happened a lot, where I think I'm so moved by something that maybe I'm thinking, what do you think? Yeah, I wish they could work me in somehow. There's something,
Right.
But it's like the whole idea about actually going through with that and actually walking up there.
And it wasn't even necessarily that he approached it; is that he was like acting a little crazy and kept like bothering people in the restaurant, at the bar. It was just a bit of a scene, I guess you could say.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I hope everything turned out all right with him. You gotta wonder. Yeah,
Exactly.
What's he doing now?
So yeah, I was actually just trying to get maybe hear your all's perspective a little bit on the music scene in Norman. Is there something that makes it distinctive?
Well, it's interesting because there aren't a lot of Norman bands. There are a few, but I feel like there's a difference between I don't know. For instance, trying to think of so Flock of Pigs is Norman based, I guess. They're awesome. I don't know if you've ever heard of them or seen them. They're great. They have like such great energy. And there's a difference between like something like a degree of professionalism to it. I feel like there's a difference between that and like not that it's bad, but like going to a coffee shop and seeing some singer-songwriter. I feel like there's a distinct difference, and I feel like Norman has a lot of all of that, which is interesting to have in a college town because that means there's a lot of accessible music to go to. The problem is getting college kids to go.
Oh yeah,
Because they just want to go get drunk all the time, which is like great, but like our last show at the Deli was probably our biggest show. We had a lot of people there, which was really weird because up to that point we had been kind of like we were talking about earlier, trying to just like force something, just like I hate using the word force, but just like trying to get something out, trying to get something going. And this show was like, people came to see us, people sang our songs. We could be laid back and be like a band and really get that vibe going, which was awesome.
yeah.
And so I feel like that's something cool to be said about college kids coming to your show and your friends coming to the show. Whereas OKC, I feel like, you get a lot more degree of that professionalism here. You've got Tower Theater, you've got Speakeasy, you've got all these great
Jones
venues.
Assembly is also
Jones
has
Assembly.
some great performances there too.
So I feel like musically, Norman has a lot to offer, but maybe venue-wise or attendance-wise or something, there's something a little more to be offered in OKC.
Yeah, I will say that there aren't many dedicated venues in Norman.
Yeah,
like there
that's
might be places that like is a bar and happens to have a stage or something like that, or a restaurant that happens to let people play on Wednesdays and Thursday nights or something. But like there's not many places where it's like this is like the Opolis is a good example of a venue in Norman. Well, it is a bar too, but like that's like a more dedicated place where people actually come to see music specifically. And the Deli too, because they kind of have, I guess.
Well, the Deli's a dive bar, so it's a little mix.
Yeah, a little mix.
But yeah, that's a little, the lack of dedicated venues is kind of a bummer.
And it makes it really difficult and a bit frustrating to try and reach out to venues to try and book shows because none of them really value that, and a lot of them don't have like reliable contact information set up, or maybe they have a website and it says reach out to us here, and then you type in that email address that says, oh, this is a void email address that hasn't existed for 3 years. And you're like, well.
So I feel like there is like a lot of talent and a lot of good music coming out of Norman, but dedicated venues kind of, and I hate to say like stop it, but I don't know. It's kind of, and I don't know where my train of thought was going with that.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a mix of things in Norman. I feel like it's a big mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then kind of looking, I guess, maybe taking a look back or kind of looking at the big picture. It would be really interesting if each one of you, not necessarily put any of you on the spot, I'd love to hear the story of, you know, how you guys came together, and maybe if you wanted to each of you to share just a little bit about, you know, how you got into music and you know how you guys have kind of blended, you know, all your experiences together into this experience, so to speak.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so Logan and I have known each other for years. We've known each other for like 6 years now, but our families were friends, so we've known of each other since we were like this big. And we had like played music together. We had done some open mic nights in high school and stuff like that. Never did anything serious. He and I both went to OU. Met our freshman year because we were both theater majors, which is kind of funny because we're not theater majors anymore. But yeah, and Michael and I had played some music that first and second year of college, and then we had played a show our junior year, a Halloween show, and he had come down to play with me. We were in separate bands. He and I were playing a little two-piece, and he had this other band. And after that show, we were like,
what are we doing?
Why don't we all just like make this band? If you guys want to take over.
Yeah, I got into music. I don't know. I've always been into music. Like that's just been the thing that I've always wanted to do. So there's really nothing that I ever saw otherwise. But I started playing drums in like 6th grade, and I kind of just fiddled around because like my brother played drums, and I was mainly a guitarist beforehand. And I actually didn't start playing drums again until I started playing with these guys. So that was a fun time. But I did like drum stuff, like percussion stuff and band and stuff through high school. So that was also like what made me a better musician as far as drumming. And that's probably the only reason that I'm still good at drumming.
Got that marching band.
Oh yeah, all those rudiments, I do those constantly.
Yeah, I mean, me thinking, like, it's kind of crazy to think back on, actually, because growing up in kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s, for me, it was a lot of kind of like the alternative and kind of punk music, I guess. So, like, that whole movement actually, like, meant so much to me because it kind of was this feeling, this mentality of, like, I don't fit in with everyone, I'm not like everyone, but, like, who says that's a bad thing? I'm just going to kind of be myself. There was kind of this feeling of that behind this. And as a kid, even, that was something that I was just so behind, subconsciously, listening to bands like Weezer and like bands like Green Day, I guess. And so like that was just something that really resonated with me. And so like I always was inspired by bands like that. And I started playing guitar in middle school, and then I guess through high school played in a couple different bands, probably like 3 or 4. And then I met these guys in college. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of a sudden transition, I feel like, because we have only been a band for a year and a month, I think.
Really?
Yeah, we formed at the end of 2017, like the very end of 2017, and so it was kind of a sudden transition because we had that October show, and then we were like, "What are we doing? Let's like be in a band." And that following December or January, we released a demo version of It Was Real. That was kind of our first, like, hey, we're a band. And he continued to visit every couple of weeks. We'd do some shows, we'd practice.
Yeah, we'd say, like, hey, like, we'd send him, like, a voice memo and say, like, this is something we were kind of working on. Like, could you think of any drums for this?
And so we kind of, that was, like, that was a phase of the band. We like to think of it as, like, different seasons.
Yeah.
Because, like, we feel completely different now than we did a year ago. So that first phase, those first, like, 6 months before June when he moved down, we were just writing long distance, like doing shows when we could, practicing when we could. And then he moved here in June, and we've got like 2 separate houses. We've got one that we record at and kind of hang out at, and then one that we live in, which is great.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like this is a very different phase than we were in a year.
Yeah, every once in a while, there's like some usually like particular large event that makes us feel like, I feel like we've kind of transitioned into kind of a new chapter for us. Like, a huge hurdle was getting music recorded, because we just knew from the beginning we need music recorded. Otherwise, how are we going to show. Like it's too hard otherwise to communicate to someone who's booking a show, miles away. Now we can just say, here's what we sound like. They don't have to be there. They don't have to see us. So that was just this huge hurdle for so long. Saving up the money to do it, that was a big thing too.
Oh yeah, I assume that is not inexpensive to.
No, it's not. And we did learn a lot from this release. Different things that we want to do with marketing, with promotion, with sound and vibe in general, with just the delivery of our next project. I feel like we've learned a lot, but it was a great first step to put music out there and to put ourselves on the map and have people have something that they can connect with and listen to.
Yeah. In fact, Who Is Real, I believe that was the first song or the first tune of your all's that I heard. And it was interesting because I was almost like I had two different channels of my brain going. I was really digging the sound, and so I'm like really wanting to kind of just be with that. But then the lyrics. And so it's kind of like I felt myself sort of, in a good way, in a great way. Very mind expanding, I guess is what you'd almost say.
It's a trip.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah, and it kind of left me with some of my own questions. It's kind of like just listening to the lyrics, and it kind of just led to. And so I guess now that I'm thinking about this, I don't think I was thinking it so much in the moment, but it kind of looking back at it, there's definitely a very contemplative aspect to this.
Yeah. I feel like we're very intentional in what we do, which is something that's cool that I feel like you don't find in a lot of bands. It's something that being very intentional in what we do, and we have a reason for what we do. I don't know. I think that's really cool. That drives all of us to keep doing this thing, to keep creating art, just because it's what we want to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing else, so this is it. This is where we're going.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. And we all have a bit of experience in different areas of sound. Like he's done years of live mixing, and doing live sound in that way. I grew up ever since in middle school. I've been working on home recording, so I've had a lot of experience with writing and recording that way. So I love when we're writing to think how do these unrelated elements just the kick by itself or just this bass line that don't necessarily have meaning by themselves, how do you contextually make them come together to communicate something deliberate, either in a feeling or an emotion, something specific you want the listener to understand or relate to. That's just one of my favorite things about art and expressing yourself in that way.
Yeah, it's almost like the word that kind of comes to mind is almost like curated. I know when you look at visual art in here, you think about something that's curated. I wonder if in some ways this is kind of and there again, I don't know where all musicians are at or in terms of this kind of development, but it's interesting to me to kind of think of the sound, for instance, curating a certain sound,
right,
or certain elements in a certain way that are related to each other.
Definitely.
And I feel like I don't really have the right words for this because obviously I'm not a musician and I don't know a lot about it.
Well, our taste has changed so much over time. When we started playing music, it was all kind of more rock oriented stuff. And we've definitely strayed from that path, I would say.
I feel like rock obviously still influences us, rock structure and
definitely,
and obviously the bass, guitar, drum element. But I feel like we draw those inspirations from hip hop with so many layers, little hidden things that you might not have heard. We've been listening to this instrumental band called Polyphia, and their arrangements are insane. Just the technicality. So I feel like it's a cool blend of all these things that have inspired us. I really like it. I really do.
Yeah. Do you guys feel just really comfortable to just kind of let this thing just kind of evolve on its own?
Oh yeah.
That's one big thing. Obviously we're deliberate in our decisions, but a big thing is just to make sure it's genuine. This is just us creating. I don't want to force anything. I don't want anything to be we have to first bridge, chorus. It's just we're gonna jam. We're gonna figure this out, and
sometimes the way we feel about a choice one day, we might change our mind the next day, or we might say, hey, let's try this, and then it's not always going to work out. We're going to say, I liked it more the other way. That's great. That's what's nice about not rushing into it. You can so easily just play with each other without the needs to jump into recording and solidifying things to be a certain way when you haven't necessarily thought about all the combinations of elements or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and then as far as like when you guys are performing live, is it possible that maybe each performance is maybe a little different depending on how you guys are feeling?
Oh yeah, I would. Yeah, you can't go into a show knowing what you're gonna do. That would just be a detriment. I feel like because you have to just be totally connected to the moment like that. Especially, and that's what's great. Like the longer that I've known these guys, like the more we've been through together, I feel like I can just really get a sense of just like I don't know their energy. You could say as we're on stage, like. We're really just like feeling each other out, just feeling out the moment and having a great time. Is the best way I can describe it.
And it is different based on different circumstances, like venue size or audience, or maybe we're like emotionally feeling something, burdened someday. And so I feel like you have to take in those different extenuating circumstances and still deliver this product that people like literally are paying to come out to see. So I feel like every time it's a little different, but you always have to kind of find this center. Like, all right, I need to connect. I need to like do my thing, and that's so much fun. Like I love just like that's what I want to do. Is I just want to perform and just be myself.
Yeah,
so it's a cool feeling.
Very cool. And then I know we were talking a little bit. We had kind of an unplanned break here along the way, and it was really interesting. And I hope I'm not being repetitive. I'm trying to think it just there again. Being this in the moment, sometimes I have a hard time remembering where we've been. But it was, and I want to say that it was, I think it was Michael that was maybe talking a little bit about kind of like the authenticity in terms of how you guys started out. And I know Jeremiah, you were speaking to that as well. It would be interesting, and I don't necessarily want to ask you guys to repeat what you were saying, but it was really something that stuck out in my mind talking about when you guys first started performing live. There's that tendency to want to try to be. A certain, to deliver a certain way or sound a certain way.
Well, isn't everything that way? Isn't there always an unexpected, unspoken expectation? Like, because you go into it and you think like, oh, there's rules to this, but there really isn't. Like, the most interesting stuff is going to come out when there's none of that, when there's no barrier or anything. You're not trying to be a certain way. That's not what's going to be magnetic to people, you could say. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Well, yeah, it's pretty clear when things are forced. I feel like people can tell. And so, yeah, kind of what we had been talking about earlier is this like expectation when we first started to, be this energetic band, deliver this certain product, and we hadn't developed, this connection, this energy between us, because that's a big part of the writing process, the performance. It's just being able to feel each other's energy.
I had to get to know this guy first.
That's great.
Yeah.
We relate on a couple things.
Yeah,
just a couple.
Yeah, but it's and that whole idea of being able to trust and be able to let the audience just really get to know you guys through the music is very interesting. And I also applaud you guys because I know that can't be easy, right? We we live in this big entire world where there's all this noise and people's impressions of what they think things should be, and to be able to just relax into this to a certain. And there again, I hope I'm not using the wrong word, relax. I don't know if that's But
I guess there's a bit of reflection that comes down to it because like. We've, over the course of this year, have completely changed our paths. And we're only about to completely change our paths even more by moving across the country. He dropped out of school to pursue music. We've just made so many of these huge transitions.
Right. So last year, I had just made the decision because, this is something that we all were like, okay, we're 100% on board. And it's rare that you find people that are like-minded on the same exact path. And, that's cool that I can trust these guys with that.
Yeah.
But, I made a scary step.
And those choices aren't going to make everyone happy. That's kind of what I meant by the reflection. Like, there's going to be things that we do, for example, like the decision to leave school. That's that's a frowned upon thing, you could say. But to us,
to us now I have a year to save up to move and a year to cultivate our sound and our aesthetic, rather than being miserable, forcing myself to do this thing for a year for this piece of paper that I'm not going to use.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom and Dad. But yeah, I feel like that really opened up a lot of different doors and a lot of different outlets for me to express myself that I wouldn't have had if I had been tied down with these assignments that I just don't give a shit about.
Yeah. No, but it really is. It's to be able to be dedicated to what you want to do is. I'm telling you, that's huge.
It's huge. Cool. It's a weird feeling because not everyone, and we all go through. everyone in their 20s goes through this crisis. Like, what am I doing? What's next? Where do I go? What's my life path going to be? And it's cool to have, a group of guys that we're all like, yeah, we know exactly what we're doing. We know what direction we want our lives to go, and we're going to work. Like, we're going to give 100% and do it.
Yeah, and you can definitely, I mean, it's very, and I guess if someone's watching the video of this, it's very apparent, it's very evident. I think even if you're listening to this, just hearing the way you guys are relating to each other and the way that you guys, the energy that you're giving off, I mean, this is I just don't think this is something that happens all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it.
And I thought what we might do, since we're kind of maybe starting to, the path is kind of narrowing a little bit in terms of what we're talking about. I didn't know if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about maybe anything you want to share about what do you think coming up, or just anything you guys like to talk about.
New music.
Yeah, so we're in the process of writing right now. We've got a couple demos that we're going to put together. We're going to do some behind the scenes stuff and try and get it out and make sure some people hear it. I don't know, it's really exciting working on a new chapter because we're moving to Seattle in August.
Wow. Yeah.
So we're using this whole next 6 months to really dig in, write music, have stuff prepared, have a lot of content
Hit the ground
for people.
running as soon as we get there.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Because he won't be in school, we'll all just be working, so let's do it. We got nothing else, so this is what I'm spending my time doing.
Oh yeah, and I bet the scene out there is amazing.
We're visiting in March. To kind of scope out areas and go have fun and just see what it's all about, and man, stoked for that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a good time.
Well, that's great. Well, I didn't know if there's anything else you guys wanted to add, but I think we're kind of
No, we have shows in April.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Shows in March, shows in April.
Yeah, so our next show is going to be March 7th at the Deli.
At the Deli.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Guys, I want to take just a few moments here just to thank you all so much for coming up all the way from Norman. It really means the world to me that you guys have come up to spend time.
Definitely.
And I have to say, this has been a really interesting, just hearing from you guys. I call it a conversation, but I'm hoping that it's more just me hearing from you guys. That's really the important part of this, but I really, really appreciate it.
For sure.
Look forward to hearing you guys live in the future as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
You bet. Thanks, man.